Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joining you as an audience because I'm on my own once again. I'm solo, flying solo. It's always great to have a contributor next to me here in the studio, but today that's not possible, so it's all about your contribution. There's plenty, as always, to talk about when it comes to the world of Celtic, and already we've got some messages coming through. But let's have a look through a few of the topics, the talking points. We're again on Thursday night, we're up against Sarajevo. I remember last year we played them in the Champions League qualifier. We won't be playing at the same stadium. The game has been moved to a stadium about 40 minutes away. But obviously, any of these margins that's going to assist us will be important on Thursday night. It's a massive game. It's a one-off. It's the play-off for the Europa League group stages. So let's have a wee look at that. What is your preferred 11 after the exertions of last week? And probably the best performance of the season against Hibs. The club who are threatening to become the second force in Scotland. I keep saying that. People are questioning that. Well, they're not the second. If they're not the first, then where are they? They're going for the second, just as Rangers are trying to topple the first. So Hibs are looking to be the second force in Scotland, and we overcame them. It was the best performance of the season. I think Celtic could have scored more than 3. We'll talk a wee bit about that as well. Lee Griffiths and Tom Broderick are on their way back. Both of them were on the bench against Hibs. So let's have a wee chat about them, because obviously there's no empty jerseys at Celtic this season. There can't be. We can't afford there to be. There's been loads of speculation flying about around odds on Edouard. But again, Neil Lennon's come out to say that a lot of this information is ill-informed or ill-advised. Alfie Doughty, is he the man that we're going to sign as backup for left-back, even though Greg Taylor probably had his best game of the season there against Hibs? We definitely need backup on the left-hand side. Jeremy Frimpong is back to his very best, his electrifying best. Let's have a wee chat about him. Ryan Christie, there were stories surfacing about an interest from Burnley. Again, Neil Lennon didn't entertain them when he was talking. Albiana Jetty, unfortunately, injured himself scoring again for Celtic at the weekend, but he'll be out of Thursday's game. He might even be out of the Rangers clash. And another left-back in Kasper Hoyer is being mentioned in relation to a £1.5 million move from Aarhus. He's a Danish internationalist. Scott Brown, he's been getting written off for weeks and weeks by the media and by some Celtic outlets as well. And I think he proved at the weekend exactly how important he is at Celtic. And another wee look at Jozo Simunovic. Obviously, people were saying they were surprised when he was let go, but it looks as though his injuries are still preventing him from progressing in his career any further. So there's plenty to talk about, and anything else you want to bring up as well, and we'll chat about that. That's what a Celtic State of Mind's Bulletin is all about, getting you guys involved. So follow us, Celtic, via Twitter. Good afternoon to you. You've been getting involved with our broadcasts over the last wee while, and it's always good to see you getting involved. What do you think will be our lineup on Thursday night? Let me know. There's some players hitting form just at the right time, and it will be interesting to see how we line up. Albion Ajeti and James Forrest, of course, will be out for Thursday night's game. Gary Doonan, always a pleasure to see you coming in on Facebook, and probably saw the worst piece of journalism yet yesterday coming from Keevans. This went beyond trying to drum up punters to read and listen to his drivel. Well, it's an interesting one, Hugh Keevans, isn't it? Because he's actually been on a Celtic State of Mind. Why did I bring him on to the podcast? Well, try to think back when that was now, probably a couple of years ago. I had interviewed a friend of Hugh Keevans, Hugh MacDonald, who is a journalist who I rate and regard really highly. I think anyone who's read any of Hugh's articles would agree with me. He's a great writer. He's an excellent journalist. He's balanced. He writes in a fair kind of fashion. And so it was great to get Hugh involved in the podcast a wee while back. But when I was talking to Hugh, he suggested that perhaps I speak to his pal, Hugh Keevins. And I thought, why not? He's a controversial figure. And I did speak to him. I mean, Hugh Keevins was friendly with Tommy Burns. He wrote Tommy's book, Tommy Turns. Is it Twists and Turns, isn't it? He wrote his book back in the 1980s. And he spoke fondly, in actual fact, about Tommy Burns, the late, great Tommy. But then I'm thinking back to some of the other things that's happened. I remember him being banned from the Celtic Supporters Club on London Road. I remember the picture of him outside there after he was banned. I remember also his comments around Lubomir Moravcik, the unknown player coming in, and Hugh Keevins talking about the fact that we couldn't get enough money together to bring in John Spencer, and I think those comments came back to haunt him. How did I find Hugh when I met him? I went through to meet him actually in Clyde Studios to interview him, and he came across, particularly off tape, as someone who was a Celtic fan, believe it or not, Gary. And I know that's difficult sometimes when you read some of the journalism that he partakes in these days. But he did speak about a fondness that he had for Celtic growing up. The fact that there was a picture of Charlie Tully on the living room wall of his family living room. So on the basis of my meeting with Hugh, he came across as someone who had this affection and fondness for Celtic. And it makes it even more difficult, doesn't it, when people, it's not about criticising Celtic, because there are occasions where you've got to criticise the club, and we criticise them. We criticise them on this podcast. You guys and girls do it as well. And it's with merit, it's fine. But obviously there's a lot of articles that come out from so-called Celtic people, and you just wonder what the motivation is. So what's your thoughts on that? I mean, I remember putting out that podcast. I got a lot of flack for it. Why are you giving him kind of airtime, etc.? Well, he didn't need airtime from me because he gets enough of that himself. But I did want to speak to him in relation to the journalism that he did around the takeover. It was during a period when I'd done a series of takeover podcasts. I spoke to a lot of people who are involved in various different ways, and Hugh was one of the journalists around about that time who was covering the story in depth, and I wanted to speak to him about that. But what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on some of the stories that are coming out? The other one that I mentioned yesterday was the one that Peter Martin came away with regarding the unrest again, in the Celtic camp, and that came out just before the Hibs game, so the timing wasn't great. Peter Martin, again, I've met Peter, and he was kind enough to allow me to visit his studio a wee while back when we were kind of thinking about setting up the State of Mind studios, and went in, seen the setup in there, spoke to Peter. He was very, very helpful actually that day. I believe him to be a Celtic fan. I know that he does a lot of the Celtic live events, doesn't he, for the club as well. So I don't dispute that in any way, shape or form. But I think there was a bit of mischief in the suggestion that, Ayer and Julian were unhappy. He named that 3 players were unhappy at Celtic, Edouard being another one. It kind of harked back to that time that Chris Boyd claimed that there was a rift in the dressing room. He refused to give anybody a source. It turned out that there was no rift whatsoever. So I just think people have got to be careful, because, the narrative in the Scottish media often is of, bigging up a certain club and a certain club's assets to try and sell them off. And then whenever Celtic got an important game, trying to sell off our players and create disruption in the camp. And I think it needs to be challenged, Gary. Certainly, I do think it needs to be challenged. There's nothing wrong, as I say, with balanced criticism, but we need to challenge when, these stories are being thrown in there just to create some kind of unrest. And the avenue in which they're doing it, on social media with links to stories, etc., it creates a bit of a frenzy, doesn't it, on social media, and hopefully we can give you a platform to come on and speak about it and criticise it as well, because I think we need to do that. I've seen a lot of talk around whether or not certain publications should be banned from Celtic Park and certain journalists should be banned from Celtic Park. And again, that's a difficult one. There's certain publications I wouldn't have anywhere near Celtic Park. The Sun, for example, and for a great number of reasons, as well as the treatment of striking minors, of which my father was one. The treatment of the Hillsborough disaster and the victims of the Hillsborough disaster as well, being obvious ones. There's been so many others as well that you just wouldn't give them any kind of airtime. And there's other publications that, I'm not happy about, but journalistically, there are people that write and do a good job largely who, are allowed into Celtic Park and they're given press access, and they go away and often they create pieces that are beyond critical of the club. They're mischief making a lot of the time. And there's been occasions as well within press conferences when, given the opportunity, some people have asked inappropriate questions at inappropriate times of people like Peter Lawwell. I remember them throwing in a grenade about the child sex inquiry, that obviously the sex abuse inquiry, which there's no way Peter Lawwell could answer questions on that, and it was disrespectful. And it's one of the things where it's a case that's ongoing that Peter Lawwell couldn't possibly comment on during a press conference where the actual subject at hand was football. So, yeah, it's something that needs to be managed. A Celtic State of Mind have never had access to Celtic Park. We've never had press access in any way, shape or form at Celtic. It's something that we did seek back in the day. We did try and engage with the club in that respect, because we felt that we would be able to use that, not to sell it to Celtic fans, but to use it as part of a bulletin that we're using now. I mean, we could show press conference footage after the embargo, and we could comment on it, and we could ask you for your comments, and I think that would work well. But we don't have access, despite numerous requests, whereas some people get access, and I think they abuse it. And I'm not talking about Celtic outlets, I'm going back to Gary's point. So yeah, that's something that is up for discussion, so please let me know your thoughts. I have asked what the lineup's going to be on Thursday night. It's a game I'm really looking forward to. Is it going to be a nervy night? Certainly last week wasn't it? Just because the way these tournaments are set up, it seems that we get to know some clubs. We play them more regularly than we have throughout our history. And Sarajevo, we played them last year, so we know a bit about them. And it'll be interesting to see how we line up. So Joe Porter is going with Barkas in goals. Automatic choice now, isn't he, Joe? Very impressed with the way that he's playing, almost like a sweeper at times at the back. Very comfortable with the ball at his feet. He's comfortable in just, distributing that around either with his feet or throwing it left and right. I do like the style of Barkas. I like how he's developing. It's interesting, again, to go back to the press question that we opened with, thanks to Gary. The stick he was getting just a few weeks ago, Barkas, but I think the Celtic fans are seeing the true worth of that guy now. And I mentioned earlier, yesterday actually, during the match day, that he would be the type of player that Brendan Rodgers, the departed Brendan Rodgers, would have liked as a goalkeeper. Someone who's comfortable with the ball at his feet. Very much a modern trait in goalkeepers these days. So Barkas is a first pick, absolutely. Julian, that's an interesting one, because obviously he's been missing due to the back injury. Joe, can anyone tell me, is he going to be fit? Is Neil Lennon giving us an update on that? Duffy, I was going to say King, but it's King Beaton, and Beaton was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant against Hibs, wasn't he? He was brilliant during the week again, in Europe against Riga. He's one of the players that Neil Lennon rates highly. He goes back to him all the time. He's never been a first pick under Lennon, but you know that he's a Lennon type player. He's someone that Lennon trusts, and he is repaying that trust, isn't he? 2 brilliant performances against Riga and against Hibs. Taylor, was that his best performance in a Celtic jersey at the weekend, proving a few doubters wrong? There's still areas of his game where he puts his foot in the ball, turns back, plays it sideways, all that kind of stuff. But again, I think that he had a very good game against Hibs, possibly his best game in the hoops. Frimpong, That boy is dynamite at the moment, isn't he? And I think that if we can continue to get a tune out of him like that, then the levels that boy can go to are absolutely incredible. I mean, when he's on fire like that, he just puts the fear of life into the fullbacks. He plays on instinct. He's past his man before he even thinks about it. I've heard a lot of people, and one of the pundits yesterday, Kevin Graham, a guy who has been involved with a Celtic State of Mind from day one, and someone whose points I respect, was talking about Frimpong's final ball. He did say he was nitpicking because Frimpong's in great form. But again, it's something that he can continue on. I think the point I made was that against Riga, he played 3 brilliant final balls, didn't he, in the last 10 minutes, and the final one ended up with a goal from El Yunusi. So, Joe, you're going for Brown and McGregor. The Brown and McGregor partnership is something I can't see past it. I've seen a lot of people talking about Brown being rested, and then he performs like he did against Hibs. And he's a linchpin again in the midfield, isn't he? So Brown and McGregor, Christie, El Yunusi and Edouard. So you're looking again. El Yunusi classed as the second striker, I guess, off the shoulder of Edouard, but playing almost between Christie and Edouard in that position. Have we found El Yunusi's best position? I think, Lawrence Conley, another one of our pundits, was calling for El Yunusi to play there. I think that was probably after he'd seen him playing for Norway. He was calling for him to play behind the striker, and he definitely looks comfortable there, doesn't he? With Christie's in and out of the news quite a bit. There was a reported bit of interest from Burnley for Ryan Christie, but I think Neil Lennon was of the opinion that wasn't something that was in the pipeline. He was spinning some plates, but I think that was more to do with transfer targets rather than players leaving the club. So that was an interesting bit. I think the kind of furore, not even after a defeat, because we haven't had a defeat for a month, the last one and the only one being this season against Ferencvaros, but the furore that follows any performance that isn't a top-notch performance in the press is quite unheralded, really. Before you know it, half our team are getting sold, and it's doom and gloom. But I think that must be frustrating for Neil Lennon. So he was putting a few people straight, I think, the other day when he was talking to the press. Follower Celtic, Brown proved any doubters yesterday. I'd go for the same team, but Klamala for Ajeti and Turnbull for Christie. Now, there's an interesting point, because I think Turnbull came on and was really impressive, wasn't he, against Hibs? Did he do well enough yet to displace Christie? I still think Christie's an important part of this starting lineup. I really do. I would say that Turnbull's better on the corner kicks for sure. I wouldn't, I don't rate the corners a lot of the time from Ryan Christie. And I know, I'm not being overly critical of him, because I do think he's an important part, and he's a first pick for me, Ryan Christie. I think that sometimes he's the guy you're looking at just to pull something out the bag, even if it's a 25-yarder. Tried a few times yesterday, sometimes when there was something better on, maybe a better option on, and then that led some fans to think he was being greedy and it was all about Ryan. But sometimes you need a player to do that, especially if it's tight, and it might be tight on Thursday night. I think the fact that we were so open but a lot of that was down to the way Hibs actually performed, as well as Celtic. I'm not taking any credit away from Neil Lennon, but at least Hibs came out and played, didn't they? They didn't park the bus. They didn't have 10 and 11 men behind the ball. So credit to Jack Ross. Jack Ross is somebody, I think on Twitter quite a few times I've suggested that I've seen something in Jack Ross that he might have been a Celtic manager in the future. Maybe overplaying it a wee bit, to be fair. Has he got that? I was speaking to a Sky Sports reporter and I asked the question if he had, in the future, I'm not asking him to replace Neil Lennon, don't get me wrong. In the future, has he got what it takes to develop into someone of that stature? And the Sky Sports reporter didn't think he did. He thought he was a very accomplished coach in his own right, but he didn't think he had what it took to take it to the next level. And I think that's something that you need, obviously, at a club like Celtic. But I do rate him. I rate him highly, and I rate his assistant highly as well, John Potter. Now, Football Prime Ginger, how are you? I'm very well, and I appreciate that I might have a message on social media from you. What I would say is, not being the big I am here, there's quite a few messages coming through as a result of these bulletins, so I'm working through them, and I will get back to everybody individually. I've got a wee list of books that I need to send out as well, and I will do that. Absolutely no problem. I'll try and get through them all this week. So, Silky Skills 85 wants to see McGregor, Turnbull and Christie as the midfield three. Brown was good v Hibs, but 2 games a week might be too much for him nowadays. It will eventually get the better of him, I think, won't it, playing 2 games a week? But again, interestingly, Neil Lennon brought up the fact that he's got all the stats. And we are a stats-driven industry in football, aren't we? Some people think too much, so I think there's pros and cons. I think you need them. You need to use them. But you don't put everything on the stats, do you? Some people might disagree with that. Alan Morrison has been contributing to A Celtic State of Mind under normal circumstances, in any case, in relation to stats, and I do find them intriguing. I find the stats intriguing. For example, last season, Maurice Boyer, who has agreed to speak to A Celtic State of Mind, so I look forward to that interview when it happens, was very good defensively, playing fullback. I know that a lot of Celtic fans didn't rate him very highly. A lot of the pundits in the ACSOM group didn't like Bower or Boyer. I think Colin Watt, one of our pundits, wasn't a fan, didn't think much of him. But the stats said that he was a good defender. The stats probably say that Greg Taylor's a good defender, and the stats probably also say that Frimpong is not. But then Frimpong has got other assets to his game that outweigh them. So should Brown start on Thursday night? I think I would start him. I think he is the linchpin. He is the linchpin of that team. And it's one of these games, isn't it? They're coming thick and fast. And it's a must win. We need to win that one-off game to get through into the Europa League group stages. We would much rather have been in the Champions League, of course, but we are where we are, and it is exciting now to find out, if we get through, who we will be facing in the group stages. David Crines would go Barkas, Duffy, Beaton and Ayer. Interesting how after a couple of games, Beaton is the man that would be picked for most teams, I think, at centre-half, because Julian may well still be injured. I think he probably will miss the game on Thursday night. But even if he was fit, would Beaton keep him out? Probably. It might be a risk to throw Julian, the £7 million man, back straight into the team. You've then got El Hamid, who is very assured at the back, very cool. He's good at going forward as well, isn't he, El Hamid? But he wouldn't displace Beaton at the moment either. So Duffy, Beaton and Ayer, with Taylor and Frimpong either side. Brown, McGregor, Turnbull, Eddie. El Yunusi impact subs being Christie, Klamala and Encham. It does show you the depth of the squad that we've got now, where people are picking a team with Christie and Encham on the bench, doesn't it? 2 quality players to have on the bench. And we will have a strong bench. That's so important. We don't have the option of 9 on Thursday night, so it'll be interesting to see. There's going to be a striker on there. There's got to be a striker on there. I think Eduard will start. Again, going on the speculation, Lenny didn't entertain any of the suggestions that Eduard's on his way out. We know how modern football works. We know how the pandemic has affected the finances of every single club globally, and Celtic are no different to that. But, you know, I don't think Celtic will sell on the cheap, and I don't think any club would be prepared at this moment in time to pay what Eduard is worth. Therefore, it could well be that Neil Lennon is simply resting him from time to time. So he was rested against Livy, and the intention was that he would be rested for a period against Hibs, and that happened until Ayeti was forced off injured. And it might well be that he's just resting them for the big European games, because they're massive, aren't they, for us to get to qualify for the group stages. So an interesting lineup. 3-5-2 seems to be the preferred formation also. And from Facebook, we have Barkas, Ayer, Duffy, Beaton, Brown, McGregor, Turnbull, Frimpong, Taylor, El Yunusi and Edward. That's a strong side. Turnbull in for Christie. So there's a query then, because we've had a few people saying that Turnbull should start. Did he do enough? It was a very impressive cameo performance against Hibs. Did he do enough to displace Christie though? There's the thing. Christie's been playing week in, week out, and that would be the question. Now, Caplo Mark, do you think streamlining of the squad is required? I think this season it will be to a degree streamlined. I think we've probably streamlined it a wee bit by getting rid of the likes of the aforementioned Simunovic and Johnny Hayes. I mean, they're two players, and by the way, I'm not saying we were wrong to get rid of them. I just think under normal circumstances we would have probably kept them. Simunovic, we had another option of a year on Simunovic's contract, didn't we? And I did mention him at the top of the show. A move to his native country, and Kayeka has collapsed due to his injury record. I think under normal circumstances we probably would have kept a hold of him and Johnny Hayes, but obviously we're now short at left back. I think we're well covered at centre half, and I'm hoping that we don't move on any of our centre halves, but all the speculation's been around Ayer, hasn't it? So further streamlining of the squad. There's a few players I guess that we could move on, and it would be streamlining players like Ralston, who doesn't seem to be part of the manager's plans. There's a few others, Kundai Benyu, we've mentioned him a few times. I think a move is on the cards for him, and maybe some of the younger guys out on loan, but we would need to keep some of them because it's a long, hard season with 5 competitions to play for. The big one would be a young Dembele. What do we do with young Dembele? Because there has been a transfer request spoken about from the youngster. He's not getting enough first team football. He's looking over his shoulder at players who were way further back in the pecking order for a first team slot, and they're maybe moving on and making a lot more money than he is at Celtic. On a professional contract at Celtic, first team squad player at the beginning of the season, and some of the youth players are moving on for bigger money. He's maybe looking at that, and he's maybe looking at his options. It'll be interesting. I would much rather see him staying at Celtic, I've got to be honest with you. I think when you put that amount of work into a player, you want to see the fruits of that labour, don't you? And on both parts, you want to see him developing as well. And I think it would be good for his development. Maybe not as good for his bank balance, but it would be good for his development to continue with Celtic. And it just shows you as well that a couple of injuries, and there's an opportunity there for a player like Frimpong to come in and shine. And, Dembele was there or thereabouts. James Forrest gets injured, and then you're looking for maybe backup then. But unfortunately, Dembele's out of the top 20 at the moment, isn't he? He's not even on the bench. So I think we will see some streamlining. I think we'll see some loan deals for some of the younger players. But I also believe that we still need to bring in a left back. And I've mentioned a couple of names already at the top of the show. Alfie Doughty from Charlton Athletic. As far as I know, the last bid that we made was 650k. There has been a Charlton takeover there. And they've brought in from Norwich, they've signed Akin Fameno. And I think that may look as though Doughty is on his way out. Will we pay £1 million to bring him in as backup? He would be backup, wouldn't he? He wouldn't be a first choice at the moment. But we've also seen Casper Hoyer mentioned £1.5 million. So I reckon we'll bring in a left back. I don't think we will sell a striker. I don't think we'll sell a centre half, but we might sell one of our midfield players because we have an embarrassment of riches in the midfield. And if we need to sell, and let's be honest, we might have to sell just to ensure that we get, not so that we get through the next few months, but obviously we will have to fill in the black hole of the next few months without fans in the stadium. and the matchday revenue that brings in for a club like Celtic, when you're, selling 50-odd thousand tickets for a home game. Now, Raymond Haddon, nice football yesterday with a bit of swagger. I heard Stubbsy talking about that during the commentary, actually, that Celtic were playing with a bit of swagger. I love that terminology, playing with a bit of confidence, a bit of panache, and none more so than Bruni. I think every single season he gets the same stick, doesn't he? His legs are gone. What do you think about the stats then? People are making a career out of coming in with the numbers and telling us that Bruni's finished, and actually disagreeing with Neil Lennon, who came out and said that the stats suggest that he's doing his job the way that he wants him to do. He's 35 years of age, isn't he, Bruni? And there seems to be a lot of gas left in the tank. Every year he gets written off, and every year he proves the doubters wrong. Is he going to prove them again? Now, Stephen Forbes, you're commenting via YouTube, and we are increasing the subscriber base on YouTube on a daily basis. It's great to see. We want as many people subscribing as possible on there. All the content that Celtic State of Mind has done and will do is free. We will be selling things like published books by the likes of David Potter and Tom Campbell that will help the operation, but we're selling a quality product. We're not charging you for the content. We're selling a quality product that's going to be available very soon. Designers working on the final touches of the front cover. So, yes, with two ludicrous handball rule interpretations benefiting our rivals yesterday, alongside similar talking points in the EPL, I fear Celtic could be on the wrong end of such a decision in the derby. I fear that just about every single game, Stephen, to be honest with you. I just think there's such an inconsistency when it comes to things like that. I mean, Celtic were brilliant against Hibs, but there was still a few decisions in there, and we went on about them during the actual game. Decisions from the referee that bemused us. There was a few that sprang to mind. One on Ayer, where he was basically taken out. The ref played the advantage rule, which was fine, but then he didn't bring the decision back. He didn't penalise the player. It was a particularly bad tackle on Chris Ayer. There was a similar one. There was a similar one on Frimpong, wasn't there, where the guy's full weight went down on the ankle of Frimpong. Lawrence made the good point that, the referee might not have seen the extent of the actual stamp, but it was definitely a foul. It was definitely a foul. You could see that. And the ref was only about 10, 15 yards away from it. So, yeah, it does concern me, Stephen. I've got to say that. And I think the margins are going to be so fine at times that it could sometimes come down to some of the poor decisions that we've seen already this season. Pat, welcome back to the show, Pat. You're commenting on YouTube. I can see your avatar there. You're sitting in the Celtic Park dugout. When will we be back at Celtic Park? It makes you wonder. Probably not this year. Scary, isn't it? The months are flying past. We're almost into October. And it doesn't look as though we're going to be back into Celtic Park until maybe March next year. The dear green paradise. And Pat says, great to see Griffiths on the bench. Hope he gets minutes soon. Well, the way I was looking at Griffiths and Rogic, particularly after Rogic's move fell through, was that there are two guys that we can call upon. They're not first picks. That might change. You've seen how someone like Turnbull has staked his claim into the Celtic side, so much so that quite a few are picking him for Thursday night. But we've seen other players like that as well. El Yunusi's starting to make himself a first pick. And, Frimpong, who was out of the side, is beginning to be a first pick as well. So you just never know. It all comes down to injuries, suspensions, loss of form. If they'll get a chance, I don't think they will be on the bench on Thursday night. I think there's players who will be ahead of them on Thursday, but at some stage this season, hopefully they'll be ready when we need to call on them. Colin Watt. Now, Colin will be joining me on the Bulletin on Wednesday, and he'll also be joining me for the game against St Johnstone on Sunday. Colin says, great performance by Celtic and ACSOM yesterday. Well, thank you very much, Colin, because I did have two of my regulars, Lawrence and Kevin Graham, joined me in the studio. That was the 90 minutes we've been waiting from Brown all season. I think you're right. Turnbull was excellent. Yes, his vision is second to none. Hope Ajeti isn't out for too long. Listen, the Ajeti thing was a blow, wasn't it, on an otherwise excellent day of football for Celtic. And I think that, I'm very interested to see this partnership, because Ajeti's coming in, he's scoring a goal every 47 minutes or whatever it might be. One of the statos might tell me different, domestically at least. And you're just, it's mouth-watering as to what the partnership might look like with him and Edouard firing on all cylinders. One of the ones where we hark back to the Eddie and Dembele partnership that could have been that French connection. It would have been brilliant to see Edouard and Dembele, wouldn't it? Developing together in the hoops. It wasn't to be. And I want to see Edouard developing with Ajeti's coming, £5 million from West Ham. He looks the real deal. He really, really looks the real deal. I mean, that goal at the weekend, El Yunusi, the footwork, incredible. Break of the ball, Ajeti, the finish was brilliant. He got injured in the process, which is unfortunate. Neil Lennon says he'll be out for a couple of weeks, might miss the Rangers game. Still on the subject of the Rangers game, Chris M, Stephen Forbes, it was always going to be the case that officials can influence Sevco's cause with as much subtlety as possible. Expected bureaucracy to do the same. Let's hope it doesn't come out down to that, but I think we're all long enough in the tooth to realise that it does exist in Scottish football. And on Sunday, the performance was good enough, wasn't it? That even with bad refereeing decisions, we came through it. But there are going to be other occasions. You think about the Dundee United game, the margins were so slim in that game, weren't they? And the refereeing performance was so poor. And you just think there was an occasion where there was a penalty claim up at for Celtic. Had it been another box, you're wondering what would have happened. That is my biggest fear. Now, Scott McG88, do you think we could offer Jozo another contract to keep him as backup if we're sticking with the three? I think that ship sailed, personally. Been interesting to hear what everybody else thinks, but my opinion is that ship has sailed. And I think what's helped the cause is Beaton. Beaton has come in and he's absolutely bossed it in a couple of games. I mean, even going back to Livy when he came on, he was cool as a cucumber. Started against Riga. He was, other than Frimpong, the best player on the pitch for me. And then against Hibs, he was just cool and composed, and sometimes that's what we need. Duffy wasn't at his best, surprisingly enough, against Hibs. No writing him off. He just wasn't at his best against Hibs. So yeah, it's always good to have backup. But I think we've got El Hamid, we've got Julian coming back. And I just think Jozo, unfortunately, he's going to be plagued. He's going to be plagued with injuries, and that's very unfortunate because we had some great moments with Big Jozo, didn't we? Now, William Kennedy via YouTube. Remember, everybody get subscribing on YouTube. Can Celtic get to December the 31st without another left back, with Gutman loan spell ending? Plus, would he still need a work permit? I don't think we can afford to do that, William. I really don't think we can afford to do that. We need another left back just for the old the cover, because what happened. What happens if Greg Taylor gets injured? That's another wee fear of mine, because he came in well and he came in for a lot of criticism, but at this moment in time we have no one else to play there. He's playing well at the moment. Loss of form, injury, we need somebody to push him and we need somebody for backup. So I don't think we can afford to get out of this transfer window without getting another left back in. And you know what? Although I would like another winger, I do think that with Forrest coming back from injury, with Mikey Johnson coming back from injury, and we do have some other options out left, although I wouldn't like to play El Yunusi out there. He can play there, and it's the same with Christie. So we're well covered on the left. We've got Forrest, we've got Frimpong on the right. Dembele would have been an option out there as well, but he's not in the picture at the moment. Can we get through this transfer window and keep the kid happy, get him back into the play? I'd much rather that. I'd much rather we did with Dembele, what we've already done with Griffiths and Rogic, two guys who are so far out the picture, we've got them back in. They can offer something, they can contribute. I think Dembele could do that as well. It's important for his own development. There's a guy who could be getting more European experience. He could be getting the games. I don't think we'll be playing weak sides in the League Cup or in any tournament, but he could get games. We've got a lot of games coming up. So I don't think we'll try and risk that, to be honest with you, William. And there's a couple of left backs being mentioned. I'm pretty sure that Alfie Doughty is a preferred left back, but just recently we've had Kasper Højer mentioned as well. He's a £1.5 million target from Aarhus, Danish internationalist. Now, on the night of the transfer window closing, we're going to be doing a live broadcast. That will be an extended one. We'll keep it going. We'll be reacting to rumours. We'll be getting people in the studio to talk about everything as it happens. So get involved in that as well. I'm pretty sure it'll be an entertaining night, especially if we don't sign anybody. Right. Chris M. Keevins ruined himself in 2011 after declaring Rangers champions with 6 months of the season left. We all know how that ended. Well, there were a few comments actually when I interviewed him about Rangers that probably haven't aged well for him. I never like to focus on Rangers on the podcast, so they were edited out, to be honest with you, but they were gushing in their praise for Gerrard, and since we did that a couple of years ago, he's never won a thing. So they probably haven't aged well for Mr. Keevins, who agreed through someone else on Twitter to come back on ACSOM, but I don't know, to be honest, what I would achieve by speaking to Hugh Keevins on A Celtic State of Mind again. Now, Chris Sutherland, Turnbull will be Celtic's best midfielder by Christmas. The signs were good, weren't they, Chris? I was very impressed, really, really impressed with the kid coming in. You're looking at the injury that he had and his fight back from injury. You just wanted him to get back playing football again. For Motherwell, initially, get him back. He was a real talent for Scottish football. And, to see him doing it for Celtic, it's brilliant. It really is. So happy for him. And he looks as though he is going to be a right good player for Celtic. And this is why I think if we do sell anybody, it's going to be in the midfield department. And I'm not jumping on the same bandwagon as some of these pseudo journalists by suggesting that we are going to sell anyone. But if we do, that's a position, isn't it, that we're well covered in. And Turnbull's coming in. You've got Encham on the bench, who's a class act. You've got Rogic coming back into the fray. We're very much covered in that department. Free speech for the dumb. Welcome back. You do get involved in the Bulletin regularly, so it's always welcome to see you. Hugh Keevins' grasp onto relevance by causing controversy. He does. It's all he's got. Knows nothing about football, just how to stir it up. You know this? The frustration for me is I think he knows plenty about football. That's my frustration. I think he knows plenty about football. And then off tape, lovely guy and all that. You find that about a lot of journalists. You find also that there's a persona that's reserved for whatever their show is or whatever the pantomime villain is that they're playing. But that's their choice. That's how they do it. I don't seek myself. I'm not calling myself a journalist anyway, but I don't seek to court controversy on this show. We'll speak about the matters at hand. We'll voice opinions. We will often give you information that's been given to us with the blessing of the source to share it. That's what we'll do. But I think there's people out there, and this hasn't just coincided with the death or the near death of the print media, in which people like Hugh Keevins obviously were a part for years and years. It's been there, isn't it? It's been there to court this controversy, and we see it a lot, even with a lot of the Celtic outlets. Let's not beat around the bush. There's clickbait outlets out there. And for anyone who doesn't know how they work, because A Celtic State of Mind, we're going out live. We're going out live 5 days a week. We do the Bulletin. We cover the games, every game so far this season, and we'll be covering every game. Sometimes you don't know where it's going to be actually screened until a day or two beforehand, but we will be covering every game. And when we cover the games, we do 3 match day analysis, reaction podcasts as well. We do it all live. But what we don't try and do is we don't try and jump on this clickbait bandwagon. We're trying to give out content that you appreciate and that you can engage with. Now, the clickbait game, I think it's almost up. I'm not naming any of the sites. You'll know what they are. But basically, they are looking to produce as many stories as they possibly can, which then filter into social media. They'll filter into Celtic News Now. They'll filter into News Now. And people click on them. The minute you click on them, a company will be charged for sponsorship. And the ad revenue, which goes through massive media companies, can be quite lucrative if you get the numbers. So basically, a lot of these sites are producing 10 stories a day. And the, amalgamated writing that's involved in these 10 stories a day is probably a couple of thousand words. You go in, there's an article that's a couple of paragraphs, even if you can call it an article. The headline bears no resemblance to the story. A lot of it's mischief making, but they're doing it because they need to get the clicks to make X amount a day so that every month they can make a living, because a lot of them are making a living out of it. And some of them are making a very good living out of it. So ACSOM will never go down that route. But we're talking about some of the people in the media being mischief makers. There's plenty out there in the world of Celtic as well. So, tread with care when you click on these websites, because you are paying. You are allowing sponsors to pay them. And a lot of the time, the content's no great. The ads ruin the experience of you visiting the website. A Celtic State of Mind's got an advert at the top there from our main sponsor, who, through the sponsorship that allows us to put this out free. I don't think it's very imposing, and hopefully it doesn't affect your experience of the Bulletin. Now, moving on. Brian McLean, 19. Kevin tries so hard to sound impartial, he sounds anti-Celtic. There's a lot of them out there that sound anti-Celtic. There really are. And John McVeigh is saying that Turnbull reminds him of Paul Lambert. Well, Paul Lambert, remember Lambert's move from Motherwell to Borussia Dortmund. It was an incredible move for him. And I think that when he was over there, he developed so well into the player that we then seen as captain of Celtic. And there's a guy there in Paul Lambert who he completely maximised his ability, and fair play to him for that. What I find interesting about Lambert is the file on Lambert as a signing target. That's something that the origins of that file was during the time of Tommy Burns. So Tommy Burns obviously scouted him, and we signed him after Tommy had left as manager. So I'm not saying he was a Tommy Burns signing, but obviously the origins of that move was during the time of Tommy, who obviously liked him when he was playing for Borussia Dortmund. If Turnbull can be as influential as Paul Lambert was at Celtic, I think we'll all be happy, John. Now, we've got Bromsgrove Boy, welcome back. Scottish Cup semi versus Dons, Sunday, November the 1st, kick-off 2:30 on Premier Sports. Well, we will be here covering that game as well. That's obviously the semi from last season. For someone so young, says Chris M on YouTube, Turnbull is very measured in his play. Christie is very energetic with some unnecessary bluster. Yeah, there is a bit of that. What I like about Christie is his ability to win the ball back, especially when he's lost it himself. He is quite tenacious in that respect, and I do like that. Chris Sutherland, he looks class just the way he hits the ball. Amazing. There's a lot of love coming in for Turnbull, isn't there? And we've got Scott McGee 88. Keevins is a wind-up merchant and he's very good at it. I don't know how people still bite. Well, again, we're talking about him. So sometimes I think what happens is, we do speak about a lot of what happens in the press, and I think we're right to do so. You're looking at some of the comments, for example, from Chris Commons. And you shake your head, because the Chris Commons I remember, probably pre-Ronnie Dyler, to be fair, was a guy who in modern day had taken up to our hearts, him and his family had taken Celtic to their hearts, and then as a pundit, it's just constantly criticising Celtic, going on about how much of a bore fest the Riga game was. You know, your article's a bore fest, Chris. You're writing for the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail. I mean, come on. Will you take your shekels from anyone if you're writing for the Daily Mail? You know, that's on a level with the Sun in many ways. So when you're looking at a lot of these criticisms that are coming in, it's to maintain their own relevance. And the very fact that we're talking about them, I don't mind talking about them and criticising them, but it shows that is working, that whole process. Kerdo, 67, was very impressed with Turnbull yesterday. Just a breath of fresh air with a vision and forward passing and not scared to hit a shot. I think, you know, he's going to force his way in, isn't he, Turnbull? He's not going to be content sitting on that bench. But you look at the bench, you look at the quality that we had on that bench, and that is a great sign that squad is going to see us through. It's going to see us through this season. Chris M, we all saw this coming. Celtic rubbish, no matter what. Can't have the establishment club and not stop the 10. Well, you know, the games will not be won and lost in the press. They've tried it time and time again. We're used to. I'm just wondering, what's the big story going to be before the Rangers game? You know, it's going to happen, isn't it? Some kind of unrest, somebody unhappy, you know, one of our star players. There's going to be a story. There always is. And it will come out before the Rangers game. You mark my words, it happens all the time. But again, I think Neil Lennon's got the measure of that. Neil Lennon, no other man in that Celtic park at this moment in time has been more derided than Neil Lennon by the Scottish press, by the Scottish media. And he knows how it works. And of course, it gets to people. I mean, if someone was to single you, any you out, or single me out for criticism, it's not nice. It can get to you. They're still human beings. It can get to them. And it's Celtic's job and it's Neil Lennon's job to protect the players from that. Lenny's suffered more than anybody else in recent times, hasn't he? So it can get to them, but I think Lennon's got the measure of them. I really do. Colin Watt, Chris Commons comes across like he is a bee in his bonnet about his time at Celtic with his agenda, but yet the press turn to him time and time again as a Celtic expert. That's right, Colin. They'll go to Chris Commons because they know they'll get a soundbite, and often, and more so than not, it's a negative one. So they'll go to Chris, and Chris sticks the boot in, you know, and he takes his shekels from the Daily Mail, and that's what they do. And I've no respect for people that do that, because it is an agenda. This is the thing. A Celtic State of Mind doesn't have an agenda. We are a Celtic outlet. We're going out live and interactive to allow Celtic fans to get involved. We're not a phone-in, but, you know, we are a method of allowing Celtic supporters to have their say. And we're bringing pundits. Today I don't have one, but tomorrow I will, and Wednesday I will. And if you want to be a pundit, let us know, and we'll get you in the studio. And we're all social distanced, and we're obviously we're sanitised, and all the equipment is as well as me. So you can come in and you can share in this experience and throw in your tuppence worth. But Colin, you're absolutely right. And Stephen Ray has his own podcast, The Celtic Ray. So get that listened to as well, and support independent Celtic media. Is it any surprise that Celtic had their best performance against a team who came to play football instead of parking the bus? I think you're right. You're spot on. And what happens is you give a bit of credit to Hibs, don't you? You give a bit of credit to them because they've tried to play. But it's also a warning sign to the other clubs that this is what happens if you come and try and play against Celtic at their own game. It's like, you know, Celtic going out and trying to play Barcelona at their game. Had that happened, you end up getting a tanking, and that's what's going to happen. If you come to Celtic Park and try and play against Celtic, we're going to have a few scalps of anybody that tries to do that. Colin Watt, justice for the 96. Absolutely. One of the best interviews, the most enjoyable, the most important interviews we've ever done on A Celtic State of Mind was with Professor Phil Scraton, who wrote Hillsborough the Truth. So 2 things for you, 2 recommendations. Read the book, which is more important than the interview that I did with him, but read his book. It is astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And then listen to the interview if you haven't already done so, because the guy is unbelievable. And, you know, he refused the knighthood. He refused the knighthood. How good is that? He didn't want to be a member of the British Empire. John Barnes did. He did want to be a member of the British Empire, but Professor Phil Scraton did not. And good on you, Phil Scraton. And if you're listening, I'd love to speak to you again. Great interview. Spend, I think, about an hour or maybe more than an hour with such a great man. John McVeigh, Frimpong must be first choice over Forrest from now on. Well, here's one for you, John. Do you play Forrest on the left? I mean, there is a suggestion that we might still be in for someone who can play out there. I mean, the balance that would give us if you had the player out on the left doing similar to what Frimpong is doing on the right. And again, I've mentioned Paddy Roberts, but I mentioned Tom Roderick and Lee Griffiths long enough, and eventually they got back on the bench. Nothing to do with me. But obviously, Paddy Roberts could do that job. But I think Jamesy Forrest could do that job as well. It would be very difficult, as influential as James Forrest is. It would certainly be very difficult to drop Frimpong at the moment, wouldn't it? You wouldn't drop him after those two performances, and if he keeps him up. Scott Forbes. You're 51, Scott. You're doing well for 51, pal. Can't remember ever seeing balanced criticism in Scottish football. Well, this is the thing. As long as it's balanced, we can deal with criticism, can't we? We can deal with criticism. I think Chris Sutton does it well. I think he criticises Celtic, but he does it in a balanced way. Joe Porter would love to see Roderick make a comeback. I think the comeback's on, Joe. I think the comeback is on. We've got a lot of fixtures coming in thick and fast. And Tommy Roderick was nowhere. We thought he was on his way. He was on his way for £4 million or something along those lines. The deal broke down. And then we realised that, you know, he was better than an empty jersey. He's a guy who, if we can get up to a level of fitness, he might come in and make a contribution. So I would love to see him making a comeback. Brian McLean, 19. What's Chris Commons' angle? He's up there with the worst. Colin Watt said he's got a beanie's bonnet. I think he does. I think Chris Commons was an excellent player for Celtic. He had his moments under Ronnie Dyler, but they were not as frequent as they had been under Neil Lennon. He was an excellent signing for Neil Lennon. Let's not forget that $300,000 we paid for him from Derby, and he'd done so well for us in Neil Lennon's first spell. He was such an important part of that team, wasn't he? And then, you know, he was one of the old guard. He was one of the seasoned pros, the experienced professionals who didn't seem to... It's not that he didn't fit in with Ronnie Dyler. He didn't buy in to Ronnie Dyler, did he? He didn't buy into Ronnie Dyler. And Charlie Mulgrew didn't buy into him either. And there was some others. And, you know, Mulgrew was out the door. We couldn't seem to get Chris Commons out the door, but he never played again. Never ever played under Brendan Rodgers. I mean, the final appearance was in the charity game. Was it the Larson's Legends against Lubo's Heroes? No, Henrik's Heroes against Lubo's Legends. And he got his wee farewell that day. That says it all as far as I'm concerned, and he's never kicked a ball again. He's got a bee in his bonnet, isn't he? He definitely has a bee in his bonnet, and he's giving Celtic a kick whenever he can. Come on, Chris. Come on to the show. Don't know where you're based, but we're in Dalkeith. You're welcome in. Talk to the Celtic fans. Talk to the Celtic fans that paid your wages for a few years and idolised you for a few years. And we can have a wee talk about Scottish football and Celtic if you wish. That's an open invitation, Chris. So, Chris M., you can tell out of the ex-players turned journalists, those who are hacks and those more rational and balanced. You're absolutely spot on with that. And again, Celtic are not beyond criticism. I just think it needs to be balanced, doesn't it? I certainly don't want a big host of the ex-players that are scared in case they don't get in on the old hospitality circuit at Celtic Park, and they don't want to lose a blazer, so they just, they become cheerleaders, don't they? And there's plenty of them around Ibrox Way, plenty of cheerleaders. I don't want that at Celtic. What I want balanced views, be that from journalists who have absolutely no connection to the club, or those who do have a connection. I mean, Chris Sutton, I use him as an example again. I've got a lot of respect for Chris Sutton. I think John Hartson gives Celtic stick when necessary, but he's balanced. And these guys are Celtic men. I know that for a fact that they're Celtic men. I've spoken to them loads off camera and off stage, and they are Celtic people, but they are also professionals, and they're very, very good at their job. And there's two of many. Michael Stewart, I rate highly. Obviously, he's got no connection to Celtic whatsoever, but I find that he's very balanced. He's very balanced in his views. He's someone that I like listening to a lot. I remember when Stephen Thompson came into the journalist game, I thought he was good. I think in time, I've got less and less time for him. But I did like him when he first came into the scene. But now he's just completely diluted, and he's lost his way a wee bit, isn't he? Colin Watt says that Stephen Ray is spot on. We're very much a counter-attacking side. Third goal yesterday, first goal at home to Livy. Play our best when we're at speed and attacking. There's a few players in that team, Colin, that I think are at their best when it's not laboured, when it's instinctive. Frimpong being a class example of that. When he's playing on instinct, the boy is untouchable. Joe Porter, anyone wanting to use child abuse as a means to score football points is the dung of the earth. Here. We've had a few coming onto the bulletin, and thankfully I'm in control of the questions coming up, and as soon as I see anybody moving into that territory, they're blocked. You then have the bulletin going on to YouTube, and then people have an opportunity to comment once it's sitting on YouTube, and you get a lot of these comments on there as well. We try and block them as much as possible, Joe. If any of the regulars finds any that I might miss because I'm engulfed in a debate with someone in the studio, or I'm working through your comments, please let me know. Just tag them in. Tell me. Grass them up. I don't mind. I'd much rather they were blocked from the page. This isn't a page to give them a platform. Chris M. You don't need it, Paul. You have the access to the heartbeat and the lifeblood of the club, the fans. You're absolutely correct, Chris. I think what I wanted to try and do is get access so that we could use it. We could use it on the bulletin. We could discuss it on the bulletin, and we certainly wouldn't be charging for it. Caplo Mark says, brilliant content, keep it coming. We will be. There's loads of other shows actually that are in the works. I mean, the bulletin, that's a staple. The match day is a staple. We still hope to go back to interviewing people. A Celtic State of Mind was built on the big interview, and we've interviewed some fascinating people in the world of Celtic over the last 3 and a bit years, and we'll still do that. And we'll throw that out there as well. I mean, some of the recent ones have been great, haven't they, from the Jobson brothers, John and Michael. They were brilliant interviews, really enjoyed them. But we're working on a whole host of other shows as well, Celtic related and non-Celtic related. But the Celtic related ones, we want to appeal to a wider audience. We want to appeal to more females. We want to get more girls and women involved in a Celtic State of Mind. We want to get you in here presenting. We want to get you in here as a pundit. So get in touch and we can arrange it. We would much rather you were here in person rather than doing the Zoom thing, because again, I could have a whole host of people on the other end of the screen on the Zoom, and you're really at the mercy of their Wi-Fi. I mean, even this morning looking at Sky Sports, catching up on Sky Sports, and they're zooming in and the Wi-Fi's breaking down. I see it on some of the other big outlets, and I want to avoid that. I know that if I do it from the studio, it will be the best quality possible, and we will certainly keep it coming. If you've got a concept, if you've got an idea for a podcast or a broadcast you think it's going to work, get involved. I'm speaking tonight to a Scottish League club, and if that goes well, we will be producing their official podcast that will be going out under a State of Mind. We're all about doing more and more broadcasts and podcasts, Celtic related and otherwise. The reason this went out a wee bit later today than the 12:30 is because we had a new podcast in. It took a wee while longer than we expected. Nothing to do with football. So we're always expanding. We're always expanding on the shows. Live shows, pre-recorded shows, TV pilots. We've got loads and loads of talent out there. If you want to come in and work on some of the videos, let me know. And we can get you in, we can get you experience, we can learn from you, and vice versa. Now, here's a good question from Brian McLean. Is Julian injured? He's injured now. Certainly injured just now. I would like to know if he's injured for Thursday night as well. John McVeigh, I believe if Frimpong had been on from the start against Ferencvaros, we would still be in the Champions League. He did make an impact, didn't he, John, when he came on against Ferencvaros? And he's a player who last season, you know, particularly when he was an unknown quantity, he ran riot, didn't he? He ran riot. Then there was a few different elements to him losing a bit of form. I think he was singled out and kicked all over the park, mainly by domestic clubs. They doubled up on him. And maybe he didn't have that instinctive play for a while, where he was maybe playing a slightly different game to suit the team. But I just think back to that game, the League Cup final, you know, and we talk about how Foster won us that. And in many ways he did. I know that Julian scored the winning goal. But Frimpong was sent off, wasn't he, that day? And he was brilliant. He was the outball. He was the outball all day long. El Yunusi, unfit, started, should never have started, had to get taken off. And that game, you know, it was a wee bit bittersweet for him because he was sent off. But, you know, Fraser Forster had the game of his life, but Frimpong was brilliant as well. We'll run for another few minutes and I'll go through some more of your points because I love getting you involved. I love getting you involved in the bulletins, and there are plenty of you involved here. Here's one from Chaz Buchan. Appreciate that we need them for TV revenue, etc., but always hated that phrase. And I think you're probably talking to the old firm phrase. It's only one of 3 possible Glasgow derbies. Yeah, you're right. What about Queen's Park? I'm watching them with interest. I'm watching them with a lot of interest. I think there's been quite a lot of changes at Queen's Park. In the not too distant past, isn't there? When you look at the fact that they're no longer playing at Hampden, they're playing at Lesser Hampden, they're now a professional club. Lord William Hawkey is involved in there. And you look at how far could a club like Queen's Park go as well. I'll be watching that one with interest. I think that there is ambition in there. I think there's a lot of ambition. So what we've got there is Chaz Buchan asking about us needing the other half of the Glasgow derby, the other half being Rangers. I think we proved we certainly don't need them. I think Celtic can stand alone. I think when there was no club playing out at Ibrox, playing in the top division in Scottish football, Celtic didn't need them. We certainly didn't need them to survive. But the big thing that happens in Scottish football, of course, is that any kind of TV deal, any kind of sponsorship deal is based on the rivalry of Celtic and Rangers. Of course it is, and we all know that. And I'm a big believer that Celtic's long-term future, if we can look beyond this pandemic, which is affecting our everyday lives, if we can look beyond that, I think Celtic's long-term future is not going to be playing domestic football in Scotland. That's what I believe. And I think that when you're talking to Peter Lawwell, and I've never interviewed him officially on a Celtic State of Mind, I would like to do that as well. I know that he gave someone else an interview before. He's welcome. He's welcome in here, as is Chris Commons. Don't think I'd get them on the same show. I think that he has ambitions outside of Scottish football, and I think he said that to me once when I spoke to him. And Dermot Desmond also has suggested recently, I don't know how likely it will be that Celtic play their football in England, but there are going to be other options. There certainly are going to be other options. You look at this pandemic, you know, not to put a dampener on the end of the show, you do look at the pandemic and you ask yourself how many of the clubs in Scotland will survive. In simple terms, there could be casualties, and then you look at the whole setup, and everything is possible then. Everything is possible. So there you have it. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to thank you all for getting involved. It's incredible sometimes when I go solo, but it allows me to engage a lot more with you guys. Is there anything we haven't gone over? I don't think so. We're looking forward to the Sarajevo game on Thursday night, and I'm pretty sure we'll be talking about it again before Thursday. I will be back tomorrow at 12:30, where I'll be joined by Lawrence Conley. On Wednesday, I'll be joined by Colin Watt, and on Thursday, Stevie Mullen. You want to come on Friday? Anybody want to join me on Friday, 12:30? Give me a shout and we'll see what we can do. All that's left for me to say is please subscribe to us on YouTube, and thank you again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.